My wife handed me a DNA test at Christmas dinner. Surprise. Your daughter isn't yours. I'm taking half in the divorce. So I told her, check your email. Her face went from smug to terrified in seconds. The turkey sat in the center of the table, untouched. My mother-in-law had just finished saying grace when Jessica reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. White, standard business size, nothing remarkable about it except for the way her fingers trembled as she held it out to me. Open it, she said. Our daughter Emma, 7 years old, sat between us with a paper crown from her Christmas cracker tilted on her head. She looked up at me with those wide brown eyes, so much like mine, and smiled. My parents sat across from us, my father mid-reach for the mashed potatoes. Can this wait? I asked Jessica. No. Her voice cut through the room. Everyone should hear this. I took the envelope. Inside was a DNA test result from one of those commercial labs. I scanned the document, my vision tunneling on the relevant section. Probability of paternity, 0%. The numbers blurred together as my brain tried to process what I was seeing. Emma isn't yours, David. Jessica's voice sounded distant, like she was speaking through water. I've been with someone else. Someone better. And now I'm filing for divorce, and according to my lawyer, I'm entitled to half of everything you've built. My mother gasped. Emma's little hand found mine under the table, squeezing tight. She didn't understand the words, but she understood tension, fear, the sudden shift in the room's atmosphere. Jessica, my mother started, but Jessica cut her off. This has been coming for years. David's never home, always working on that precious business of his. Well, guess what? That business is about to fund my new life. She smiled then, sharp and cold. Check your phone if you don't believe me. My lawyer already sent the preliminary filing. I pulled out my phone with my free hand, Emma still gripping the other. Sure enough, an email from a law firm I didn't recognize. The subject line read, Notice of Dissolution of Marriage. Check your email, I said quietly. What? Your email. Check it. Jessica's smile faltered. She grabbed her phone from the table, her manicured nails clicking against the screen. I watched her face as she opened her inbox. The color drained from her cheeks. Her eyes went wide, then wider. Her hands started shaking so badly she nearly dropped the phone. What is this? Her voice came out strangled. That, I said, keeping my tone level, is every text message, every email, every financial transaction you've made in the last 3 years. Including the ones with Marcus. My father-in-law stood up so fast his chair tipped backward. Marcus? My business partner Marcus? Jessica's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. I've known for 6 months, I continued. The DNA test you're so proud of? I had my own done 4 months ago when I found the hotel receipts in your car. Wanted to be sure before I made my next moves. You're lying, she whispered. The file I just sent you contains documented evidence of embezzlement. See, Marcus has been stealing from your father's company for the past 2 years. Small amounts at first, then larger sums. He needed help hiding the money, so he convinced you to open accounts in your name. Joint accounts, actually. The transactions are all there. Jessica's father grabbed the back of his chair, knuckles white. That's impossible. It's in the attachment. $63,000, to be precise. All traceable back to your company's accounts. The forensic accountant I hired was very thorough. I looked at Jessica. You thought Marcus loved you. He loved your access to your father's business. David, I can explain, Jessica started. I'm not finished. That same file contains every message between you and Marcus discussing your plans. How you divorce me, take half my business, and run off together. How you'd convince Emma that I was never really her father. How you'd make sure I'd pay for ignoring you all these years. The room had gone completely silent except for Emma's quiet sniffling. I let go of her hand long enough to send a quick text, then squeezed her fingers again. The problem with your plan, I said, is that you forgot one crucial detail. That business you want half of? I sold it. 3 months ago. The sale finalized 2 weeks before you filed for divorce. Jessica's phone clattered onto the table. You what? Sold it. To a tech consortium out of Seattle? The money is currently sitting in a trust I established years ago, long before we got married. A trust you have no legal claim to. I paused. But that's not the best part. My mother had her arm around Emma now, whispering something soothing into her ear. My father sat frozen, his face carved from stone. Jessica's parents looked like they'd aged a decade in the span of 5 minutes. The company Marcus has been stealing from? Your father filed a police report about the missing funds 2 hours ago. My lawyer made sure he had all the documentation he needed. Marcus was arrested at his home about 45 minutes ago. I checked my watch. You should probably expect a call from the police soon. They'll want to ask you about those joint accounts. Jessica's face had gone from white to gray. I didn't know. Marcus said. Marcus said a lot of things, apparently. Like how he loved you. How you deserved better than a husband who worked too much. How easy it would be to destroy me and take everything I'd built. I stood up slowly. What you both forgot is that I didn't build that business by being careless. Every contract, every transaction, every partnership was documented and protected. Including my marriage. What do you mean? Jessica's voice barely qualified as a whisper. The prenup you insisted we didn't need? We had one. You signed it the week before our wedding. You were drunk on champagne at your bachelorette party when I had my lawyer bring it by. Your maid of honor witnessed it. She's already given a deposition confirming you were coherent enough to understand what you were signing. This was a lie, but Jessica didn't know that. What we actually had was something better. That's not possible. But the doubt crept into her voice. What is possible, I said, is that you just handed me the perfect grounds for divorce. Adultery, attempted fraud, and conspiracy to commit embezzlement. You'll be lucky if you walk away with your car. Jessica's father found his voice. Get out of my house. Dad, Jessica started. Gab. Now. His face had turned purple. You've destroyed everything. My business, my reputation, my family's Christmas. Jessica looked around the table wildly, searching for an ally. She found none. Even her mother had turned away, shoulders shaking with quiet sobs. Emma, I said gently, crouching down next to my daughter. Want to go look at the Christmas lights in the neighborhood? Just you and me? She nodded, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. I helped her into her coat, wrapped her scarf around her neck, and guided her toward the door. Jessica tried to reach for her, but Emma pulled away, pressing herself against my leg. She's not even yours, Jessica said desperately. The test. I don't care. The words came out harder than I intended, but they were true. She's my daughter. DNA doesn't change 7 years of bedtime stories and scraped knees and school plays. You want to take her from me? Good luck. The court will see every message you sent about using her as a weapon. I picked Emma up, and she wrapped her arms around my neck. Over her shoulder, I watched Jessica crumble into a chair, phone still displaying the email I'd sent. Thousands of pages of evidence, compiled over months of careful documentation. Every lie cataloged, every betrayal preserved in digital amber. Merry Christmas, I said to the room at large, and carried my daughter out into the cold night air. The lights in the neighborhood blurred together through the fog of my breath. Emma stayed quiet, her face pressed into my shoulder. We walked 3 blocks before I felt her shaking, and I realized she was crying. Hey, I said softly, sitting down on someone's front steps and adjusting her in my lap. Talk to me, sweetheart. Are you and Mommy getting divorced? Her voice broke on the last word. Yeah. We are. Is it because of me? My heart shattered. No. Never because of you. This is between your mom and me. Adult stuff that has nothing to do with how much we both love you. But she said I'm not yours. Emma looked up at me, those brown eyes swimming with tears. What does that mean? I wiped her cheeks with my thumb, trying to find the right words. How do you explain betrayal to a 7-year-old? How do you tell your daughter that her mother lied, that biology might say one thing but your heart says another? It means, I started slowly, that sometimes families are complicated. But here's what I know for sure. I'm your dad. I've been your dad since the day you were born. I'm the one who taught you to ride your bike. I'm the one who checks for monsters under your bed. And nothing, absolutely nothing, is going to change that. Promise? Promise. She hugged me tight enough to hurt, and I let her. We sat on those steps for a long time, watching the Christmas lights twinkle and fade, until the cold finally drove us back to my car. Update 1, 2 months later, the divorce proceedings started exactly as I predicted. Jessica tried to claim ignorance about the embezzlement, but the joint accounts told a different story. Her signature appeared on every document, her phone number registered to receive transaction alerts. Marcus had been sloppy, leaving a trail wide enough to drive a truck through, and Jessica had been too smitten to notice she was being used. The criminal charges came first. Jessica's father pressed charges for the embezzlement, and the district attorney added conspiracy charges based on the evidence I'd provided. Marcus took a plea deal and named Jessica as an accomplice in exchange for a reduced sentence. She maintained her innocence, but the jury didn't buy it. 6 months of fraud, documented in meticulous detail, proved impossible to explain away. The civil divorce was almost anticlimactic by comparison. Jessica's lawyer tried to argue emotional distress, claiming I'd manipulated her into the affair through years of neglect. My lawyer presented the messages where Jessica and Marcus had plotted everything, including fabricating reasons to make me look like the villain. The judge was not impressed. "Anything you'd like to say?" Judge Morrison asked Jessica during the final hearing. She looked at me across the courtroom, mascara streaked down her face. "I loved you once." "I know," I said. "I loved you too." "Then why did you do this? Why did you let me destroy everything?" The question hung in the air between us. Why had I waited? Why had I documented everything instead of confronting her immediately? The truth was complicated, wrapped up in anger and hurt and the desperate need to protect Emma from the fallout. "Because," I said finally, "you needed to commit fully. If I'd confronted you 6 months ago, you would have cried and apologized and promised to change. You would have gaslit me into thinking I'd imagined things or overreacted. This way, there's no doubt. No room for you to claim I was the villain. You could have just divorced me quietly. You were planning to take my daughter from me. Quietly wasn't an option." The judge cleared her throat. "If you're both finished, I'd like to proceed with the ruling." She granted me full physical custody of Emma, with Jessica receiving supervised visitation every other weekend. The business assets remained in my trust, untouchable by the divorce settlement. Jessica received her personal belongings, her car, and nothing else. The embezzlement case resulted in a felony conviction, 3 years probation, and an order to pay restitution to her father's company. Walking out of the courthouse, I felt neither victorious nor vindicated. Just tired. Emma was waiting at my parents' house, probably watching cartoons and eating too many cookies. She'd adjusted better than I'd expected, but she still asked about her mother every night before bed. My phone rang as I reached my car. Unknown number. "Mr. Chen?" A woman's voice, professional and clipped. "Speaking. This is Dr. Patricia Williams from the DNA testing facility. I'm calling about the test you submitted 4 months ago." My stomach dropped. I already got those results. "Yes, you received preliminary results. However, there was a processing error with several samples from that batch. We've been retesting and issuing corrections. Mr. Chen, I need to inform you that your original results were incorrect." The parking lot seemed to tilt sideways. "What do you mean, incorrect?" "The test shows a 99.9% probability that you are Emma Chen's biological father. I'm so sorry for any distress the error may have caused. We're sending corrected documentation today, along with a full refund and information about our complaint process." I sat down hard on the curb, phone pressed to my ear. "Say that again." She repeated it, slower this time. "Emma was mine. Biologically, genetically, completely mine. Jessica's smoking gun had backfired in the most spectacular way possible." "Mr. Chen? Are you still there?" "Yeah," I managed. "Thank you for calling." I hung up and stared at the courthouse building, thinking about Jessica inside, probably crying to her lawyer about the unfairness of it all. She'd used that DNA test as a weapon, so certain of the results that she'd announced them at Christmas dinner with her whole family present. She'd wanted to hurt me publicly, to humiliate me, to prove that even my daughter wasn't really mine. And she'd been wrong. Part of me wanted to call her, to tell her that her ACE card had been fake all along. That Marcus hadn't just stolen money and her dignity, he'd apparently lied about Emma's paternity too. Maybe he'd never actually believed Emma wasn't mine. Maybe he just needed Jessica to believe it, to push her into the divorce that would give him access to more money. But I didn't call. Let her think Emma wasn't mine. Let her live with that particular lie. The truth wouldn't change anything about the divorce settlement, and it gave me a cleaner break. Jessica thought she'd dealt the killing blow, and I'd let her keep thinking that while I walked away with my daughter and my future intact. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Emma asking when you'll be home. Says she has something to show you." I smiled for the first time in weeks and started the car. Update 2, 8 months later. Emma's birthday party filled our new backyard with chaos. 8-year-olds are basically controlled explosions of energy and sugar, and I'd invited 12 of them. My mother called me insane, but Emma's face had lit up when I suggested it, so here we were. Dad. Emma tugged on my sleeve, pointing at the bounce house. Can we do presents now? Let everyone finish eating first, sweetheart. She bounced on her toes, too excited to stand still. The move to the new house had been good for her. Smaller than the old place, but it had a huge backyard and was closer to her school. Her bedroom overlooked the garden, and she'd insisted on helping me plant flowers along the fence line. Jessica's supervised visits had dropped to once a month at Jessica's request. The felony conviction made employment difficult, and she'd moved in with a friend across town. Emma came back from each visit quieter than before, and I'd started her in therapy to help process everything. Mr. Chen? A woman's voice behind me. I turned to find Rachel Porter, Emma's third-grade teacher, holding a paper plate with untouched cake. Could I speak with you for a moment? Of course. I followed her away from the noise, toward the garden beds. I wanted to let you know that Emma's doing remarkably well, all things considered. Her grades are excellent, and she's made several new friends. Rachel paused. But I've noticed she's been drawing the same picture repeatedly during free time. She pulled out her phone and showed me a photo. Emma's distinctive style, but the subject matter made my chest tight. A stick figure man holding hands with a stick figure girl. Above them, another figure floated alone in the corner, crossed out with heavy black marker. She told me the crossed out one is her mother, Rachel said gently. I'm not trying to alarm you, but I thought you should know. I studied the picture, remembering how Emma had asked me last week if her mother was coming back. I told her the truth, probably not regularly, and that was okay. We'd make our own family, our own traditions, our own happiness. I'll talk to her therapist about it, I said. Thank you for telling me. Rachel nodded and headed back to the party. I stood in the garden, surrounded by the flowers Emma had chosen, and felt the weight of the past year pressing down. The divorce. The trial. The revelations about Marcus and the embezzlement and the fake DNA test. All of it had been necessary, but watching Emma cross her mother out of her drawings made me wonder if I'd done the right thing. Daddy. I turned to find Emma running toward me, two of her friends trailing behind. She crashed into my legs, laughing. Can we do presents now? Please, please, please. Yeah, I said, lifting her up and spinning her around like I'd done since she was tiny. Let's do presents. The bounce house deflated slowly in the background as we gathered the kids around the picnic table. Emma tore through wrapping paper with efficient destruction, exclaiming over each new toy and book. My parents had gotten her a bike, which she immediately wanted to try, and my sister had sent a complex Lego set that would take weeks to complete. The last present came from Jessica. I'd almost thrown it away when it arrived yesterday, but Emma had seen the package and begged to open it at the party. I handed it over with the kind of dread usually reserved for medical test results. Emma pulled out a jewelry box. Inside, a delicate silver necklace with a small heart pendant. No note, no explanation. Emma held it up to the light, watching it spin. It's pretty, she said, then set it aside and reached for the Lego box. That simple dismissal spoke volumes. The necklace went into her room later, tucked into a drawer and probably forgotten by morning. Emma had already moved on, adapted, created a new normal where her mother existed only on the periphery. After the party, after the kids had been picked up and the yard cleaned, Emma and I sat on the back porch watching fireflies emerge in the dusk. Best birthday ever? I asked. Best birthday ever, she confirmed, leaning against my shoulder. Dad? Yeah? I'm glad you're my dad. Something cracked open in my chest, warm and painful and perfect. I'm glad too. Even though I was really mad when Mom said I wasn't yours? I'd wondered if she remembered that part of Christmas dinner. We'd talked about it in therapy, but she'd never brought it up directly with me. I was scared, I admitted. But not about you not being mine. I was scared I might lose you. That's dumb. Where would I go? She said it so matter-of-factly, with such complete confidence in our bond, that I had to laugh. You're right. That was dumb of me. We sat in comfortable silence as the sky darkened and the fireflies multiplied. Inside, my phone kept buzzing with messages. My lawyer, updating me about Jessica's probation requirements. My accountant, confirming the final business sale documents. My sister, asking if Emma had liked the Lego set. None of it mattered as much as this moment. Emma's weight against my side, her breathing evening out as sleep crept in, the absolute certainty that we'd made it through the worst and come out stronger. I hadn't told Emma about the corrected DNA test. Maybe someday, when she was older and could understand the full scope of what her mother had tried to do. For now, it was enough that she knew I was her father in every way that mattered. Time for bed, sweetheart. Carry me? She was getting too big to carry comfortably, but I hoisted her up anyway, her arms looping around my neck. Inside, I tucked her into bed and pulled her favorite blanket up to her chin. Love you, Dad. Love you too, Emma. I left her door cracked open and headed to my own room. The house settled into nighttime sounds around me, the refrigerator humming, the AC clicking on, the distant barking of a neighbor's dog. Normal sounds. Safe sounds. My phone lit up with one final message. Unknown number, but I recognized the area code. Jessica's friend's apartment complex. The message was simple: I'm sorry. I stared at those two words for a long time. Sorry for the affair? Sorry for the attempted fraud? Sorry for trying to destroy me and take my daughter? The apology felt insufficient for the magnitude of the betrayal, but maybe that was the point. Some things couldn't be fixed with words. I didn't respond. Instead, I deleted the message and turned off my phone. Tomorrow I'd deal with lawyers and accountants and the mundane reality of single parenthood. Tonight, I just wanted to exist in the quiet knowledge that Emma slept peacefully down the hall, that we'd survived, that we'd build something better from the wreckage. Update 3, 1 year later. The call came on a Tuesday. I was at work, reviewing contracts for a consulting deal, when my phone rang. Jessica's mother. David? It's Margaret. I hadn't spoken to Jessica's parents since the divorce. They'd sent Emma a birthday card last month, but otherwise maintained radio silence. Margaret. How are you? I need to talk to you about Jessica. Her voice cracked. She's in the hospital. Overdose. They say it was intentional. The office suddenly felt too small. I stepped out into the hallway, pressing the phone tight against my ear. She's alive. Stable. But David, she's asking for Emma. The doctors think it might help with her recovery. Every protective instinct screamed no. Emma had finally stopped having nightmares about her mother. She'd stopped drawing those crossed-out figures. She laughed easily now, made friends, brought home spelling tests with perfect scores and permission slips for field trips. I need to think about it, I said carefully. Please. Margaret was crying now. I know what she did. I know she hurt you and hurt Emma. But she's my daughter and she's drowning, and maybe if she could just see Emma, talk to her, I'll call you back. I hung up before she could protest and stood in the empty hallway, trying to breathe. The weight of the decision pressed down like a physical force. Emma deserved to have a relationship with her mother, even a complicated one. But she also deserved protection from the person who'd used her as a weapon. That evening, I sat Emma down at the kitchen table. She was working on a drawing, something with dragons and castles, tongue poking out in concentration. I need to talk to you about something serious. She looked up, immediately wary. Kids develop a sixth sense for bad news. Your mom is sick. She's in the hospital. Is she going to die? The bluntness of the question caught me off guard. No. She's going to be okay. But she wants to see you. Your grandmother called and asked if you'd be willing to visit. Emma set down her crayon carefully, lining it up perfectly with the others. Do I have to? No. This is completely your choice. If you want to see her, I'll take you. If you don't, I'll tell them no. She considered this, her face serious in a way that made her seem much older than 9. Will you come with me? If you want me to, yes. Okay. I'll go. 2 days later, we walked into the hospital together. Emma's hand gripped mine so hard my fingers went numb, but she didn't hesitate. Margaret met us in the lobby, hugging Emma and thanking me in a voice thick with tears. Jessica's room was on the 3rd floor. She looked smaller somehow, diminished by the hospital bed and the 4th line running into her arm. Her face was gaunt, eyes shadowed with exhaustion or regret or both. Emma, she breathed, and started crying. Emma stood frozen in the doorway. I crouched down beside her. Want me to stay or go? Stay. We walked in together. I pulled up a chair for Emma and stood behind it, one hand on her shoulder. Jessica reached out, then pulled back, seeming unsure if she had the right to touch her daughter. I'm sorry, Jessica said. I'm so sorry. For everything. For ruining Christmas. For trying to hurt your dad. For being a terrible mother. Emma said nothing. Her face had gone carefully blank, the expression she wore when trying to hide what she felt. I know sorry isn't enough, Jessica continued. I know I destroyed our family. But I want you to know that none of it was your fault. Not the divorce, not the fighting, none of it. You were perfect, and I was broken, and I made terrible choices. Why? Emma's voice came out small. Why did you hurt Dad? Jessica's face crumpled. Because I was selfish and stupid and I thought I deserved more than what I had. I didn't realize that what I had was everything until it was gone. We stayed for 20 minutes. Emma asked questions, and Jessica answered them with an honesty that surprised me. Yes, she cheated. Yes, she tried to take Emma away from me. Yes, she'd lied about the DNA test. She owned it all, laying her failures bare in a way that seemed to drain her. Can I ask you something? Emma said finally. Anything. If you could go back, would you do it differently? Jessica closed her eyes. Every single part of it. I'd appreciate your father. I'd be honest. I'd be the mother you deserved instead of the one you got. Okay, Emma said, and stood up. I'm ready to go now. We left Jessica crying in that hospital bed, and I wondered if that would be the last time Emma saw her. In the car, Emma was quiet, staring out the window as the city blurred past. You okay? I asked. Yeah. I just needed to hear her say it. Say what? That it wasn't my fault. I know you've told me that a million times, but I needed to hear it from her. Smart kid. Too smart, maybe. She'd needed closure in a way I hadn't understood. Do you want to see her again? Maybe. Not for a while. But maybe someday. I nodded. That seemed fair. We'd figure it out as we went, the same way we'd figured out everything else. 3 months later, I met Caroline at a parent-teacher conference. She was the mother of one of Emma's classmates, divorced, with a son in the same grade. We started talking about school budgets and ended up exchanging numbers, ostensibly to coordinate carpools. The first time we actually spoke beyond logistics was at the fall carnival. Emma had dragged me to the face painting booth, insisting she needed to be transformed into a butterfly. Caroline stood in line behind us with Jake, who wanted to be a tiger. Our eyes met over the kids' heads, and she smiled. Butterflies and tigers, she said. Quite the combination. I'm just hoping the paint comes off easily. Last year's zombie makeup took 3 days to fully remove. She laughed, and the sound caught me off guard. Light and genuine, without the edge of bitterness I'd grown accustomed to in my own laughter. We ended up walking the carnival together, the kids running ahead to each booth while we followed at a slower pace. So, she said after we'd bought tickets for the ring toss, how long has it been? Since the divorce? About 10 months. Me too. Well, 11. But who's counting? She watched Jake miss the bottles completely, his face scrunching up in concentration. It's strange, isn't it? The after part. Everyone prepares you for the fight, but nobody tells you about the quiet that comes next. I understood exactly what she meant. The house felt too silent some nights, even with Emma's chatter filling the rooms. The absence of conflict created a vacuum that I hadn't expected to feel so deeply. My therapist says I'm doing well, I offered. Which I think is code for you are functional enough to parent, so we'll call it progress. Caroline snorted. Mine told me I need to start dating again. I asked her if she'd met men recently. We both laughed at that, and something shifted. The conversation flowed easier after that admission, two people acknowledging the absurdity of starting over when starting the first time had ended so badly. Our first real date happened almost by accident. The kids had a school event, and afterward, Caroline suggested coffee. We sat in the shop for 3 hours, talking about everything except our failed marriages. She told me about her work as a graphic designer, the freelance projects that kept her up too late but paid for Jake's orthodontist bills. I talked about the consulting work I'd taken on after selling my business, how it felt both freeing and terrifying to not be tied to something I'd built from nothing. Do you miss it? She asked. The business? Sometimes. Mostly I miss who I was when I built it. That version of me believed things would work out if I just worked hard enough. And now? Now I know that working hard doesn't protect you from other people's choices. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand briefly. No. It doesn't. Emma noticed immediately when I came home. You like her, she said after Caroline and her son left the coffee shop. Is that okay? She shrugged, feigning indifference, but I saw the tiny smile. She's nice. Her son's weird, but in a good way. Weird how? He collects rocks. Like, really collects them. He has names for all of them and knows what type they are and everything. Emma paused. But he let me hold his favorite one today. The one he calls Sir Granite. So I think he likes me. I bit back a smile at the seriousness with which she delivered this information. That sounds like a big deal. It is. He doesn't let anyone touch Sir Granite. Not even his mom. Over the next few weeks, Caroline and I fell into an easy rhythm. Dinner when the kids were with their other parents. A movie where we actually made it through the whole film without my phone buzzing with crisis alerts. A weekend hike where Jake taught Emma to identify different types of sedimentary rock formations, and they both came back covered in mud and grinning. I need to tell you something, Caroline said one evening. We were sitting in her living room after the kids had gone to bed, each nursing a cup of tea that had gone cold while we talked. About my ex. You don't have to. No, I want to. It's only fair, since I assume Emma's told Jake about what happened with Jessica. She had. Emma's version of events had been remarkably diplomatic for a 9-year-old. Mom made some bad choices, and now she doesn't live with us anymore. My ex didn't cheat, Caroline continued. He was just absent. Physically present but emotionally checked out. For years, I convinced myself that was enough. That his showing up at birthdays and signing permission slips meant he was trying. She stared into her tea. Then one day, Jake asked me why Daddy never smiled at him the way other dads smiled at their kids. And I realized I'd been so focused on making the marriage work that I'd forgotten to notice my son was growing up with a father who acted like parenting was a chore. What did you do? I asked for a divorce. He was relieved. Actually said the words thank heavens when I brought it up. Turned out he'd been miserable for years but didn't know how to leave. Thought he was doing the noble thing by staying. That must have hurt. Less than you'd think. By the time I asked, I was already mourning the marriage. The actual end felt more like finally exhaling after holding your breath too long. She looked at me. Does that make sense? Perfect sense. We sat in comfortable silence after that, and I realized this was what I'd been missing with Jessica even before the affair. This ease of simply existing in the same space without performance or pretense. Caroline didn't need me to fill every silence with reassurances or explanations. She just needed me to be present. Caroline and I took it slow. Dinners when the kids were with their other parents. Movies where we actually watched the film instead of talking through it. Gradually, carefully, we let the kids spend time together, building a tentative friendship between them that might someday become something more permanent. You know what's funny? Caroline said one evening. We were sitting on my back porch, watching Emma and her son chase each other around the yard. I thought I was done. Thought my ex destroyed any chance I'd had at trust. What changed? I realized that one person's betrayal doesn't define everyone else. That starting over isn't giving up on the past, it's refusing to let the past define the future. I thought about Jessica in that hospital bed, about the DNA test that had been both a weapon and a lie, about the months of documentation and the careful dismantling of our marriage. About Emma crossing her mother out of her drawings, then slowly, gradually, drawing new pictures with new configurations. Yeah, I said. I think you're right. Emma ran up to the porch, breathless and grass-stained. Dad, can Jake stay for dinner? I looked at Caroline, who nodded. Sure, sweetheart. Go wash up. She ran off, Jake trailing behind. Caroline reached over and took my hand, and I let her, feeling the warmth of another chance spreading through my chest. I'm not ready to rush into anything, I said. Good. Neither am I, but maybe we can not rush together? I laughed, and it felt good. Natural. Like maybe the past year had been about more than survival. Maybe it had been about learning to build something better from the pieces. That night, after Caroline and Jake left, Emma and I did our usual bedtime routine. I read her a chapter from the book series she'd been devouring, and she asked her usual barrage of questions about plot points and character motivations. Dad? She said as I was turning off the light. Yeah? Do you think Mom will get better? I thought about Jessica's text messages, the ones that had started coming more regularly. Updates about her therapy, her probation requirements, her slow attempts to rebuild something resembling a life. She'd never be the mother Emma deserved, but maybe she could be someone better than who she'd been. I think she's trying, I said honestly. And that's more than she was doing before. Good. I want her to be okay, even if she can't be my mom anymore. Not the way she used to be. That's very mature of you. I learned it from you. You always say people can surprise you if you give them space to change. Had I said that? Maybe. Or maybe Emma had absorbed it through osmosis, watching me navigate the wreckage and build something new. Love you, sweetheart. Love you too. I closed her door and walked back through the house, looking at the life we'd created. Pictures on the wall, Emma's artwork on the fridge, her backpack by the door ready for school tomorrow. Normal things. Beautiful in their ordinariness. My phone buzzed. A message from Caroline. Thank you for tonight. Jake hasn't stopped talking about Emma's treehouse. I smiled and typed back. Emma's already planning their next adventure. Fair warning, it involves a lot of mud. Her response came quickly. Perfect. His therapist says he needs more unstructured play anyway. Apparently I've been hovering. Aren't we all? Hazard of traumatic divorces. True. Coffee tomorrow? I looked at the calendar, mentally shuffling Emma's schedule. My mom had agreed to pick her up from school tomorrow. I could do coffee. Yeah. Tomorrow works. I set the phone down and walked to the back door, looking out at the yard where Emma and Jake had played. The grass needed mowing, the fence needed painting, and the garden beds needed weeding. All of it felt manageable, though. All of it felt like life moving forward instead of staring backward at the wreckage. Jessica's attempt to destroy me had failed, but not because of my revenge. It had failed because destruction only works if you let it. Emma and I had survived, adapted, grown. We'd taken the pieces Jessica tried to shatter and built something better. And somewhere in that hospital room, Jessica had finally started to understand what she'd lost. Not my business, not my money, not even my forgiveness. She'd lost the chance to be part of something good, something real, something that could have lasted. I went to bed that night feeling something I hadn't felt in over a year, peace. Not the absence of struggle, but the presence of purpose. Emma slept down the hall, safe and loved. Caroline existed as a possibility, not a solution, but a chance at building something new. And Jessica? Jessica was on her own journey now, one I hoped would lead her somewhere better. But it wasn't my journey anymore. I'd spent months documenting her betrayal, planning my response, protecting my daughter from the fallout. Now I could let it go. The revenge hadn't been in destroying her. It had been in refusing to let her destroy us. In choosing to build rather than burn. In showing Emma that betrayal doesn't have to define you, that love isn't diminished by biology, that families are what you make them. That was the real payback. Not the court victory or the evidence files or the dramatic Christmas dinner revelation. It was this, lying in my own home, in my own bed, knowing my daughter slept safe and my future held possibility. Jessica had tried to take everything, and I'd let her think she'd succeeded. Then I quietly built something better in the ruins. Epilogue, 2 years later, Caroline and I married in a small ceremony at the courthouse, with Emma and Jake as our witnesses. We talked about something bigger, but both agreed we'd done big weddings before. This time, we wanted simple. Honest. Real. Emma was 11 now, tall and gangly and brilliant. She'd started middle school with a kind of confidence I'd never had at her age. She video called with Jessica once a month, supervised conversations where they talked about books and school and carefully avoided the past. Jessica had completed her probation and found work at a nonprofit, helping other women navigate recovery. She'd never be the mother Emma needed when she was young, but she'd become someone who acknowledged her failures and tried to do better. It wasn't redemption, exactly, but it was progress. The previous month, Jessica had asked if she could attend one of Emma's school events. Not parent-teacher conferences or anything requiring direct interaction with me, but Emma's art show where she'd have 3 pieces displayed. Emma had thought about it for 2 days before saying yes. I'd watched from across the gallery as Jessica stood in front of Emma's painting, a watercolor of our backyard garden with its carefully tended flower beds. Emma had titled it Things That Grow. Jessica had cried silently, mascara streaking down her face, while Emma stood beside her explaining her technique. She wanted to stay longer, Emma told me on the drive home. But I said I had homework. Did you? No. But I needed her to leave. It was enough for one day. That's fair. Do you think she'll ever be okay? Like, really okay? I considered the question carefully before answering. I think she's learning how to live with the choices she made. That's different from okay, but it's something. Emma had nodded, satisfied with that answer, and switched the radio to her favorite station. She sang along to songs I didn't recognize, off-key but enthusiastic, and I thought about how resilient children are when given the space to heal. Dad? Emma called from the living room, pulling me back to the present. Jake's hogging the remote again. Jake, give your sister the remote, Caroline called back, not looking up from her laptop. She's not my sister, Jake protested, but he was grinning. At 12, he'd learned that arguing with Emma was pointless. She always won. I walked into the living room to find them sprawled across the couch, arguing over whether to watch some nature documentary or an animated series. Normal sibling chaos. Beautiful in its mundanity. Compromise, I suggested. Documentary now, cartoons after dinner. They both groaned but agreed, and I settled into my chair, watching them watch the screen. Caroline joined me a few minutes later, leaning against the arm of the chair. "I never thought I'd get this again," she said quietly. "The noise and the fighting and the normalcy." "Neither did I." "Was it worth it? Everything you went through to get here?" I thought about Christmas dinner 2 years ago. About Jessica's face when she realized her plan had imploded. About the months of documentation and legal battles and Emma's nightmares. About rebuilding and starting over and learning to trust again. But I also thought about the smaller moments. Emma's first day at her new school, when she'd come home with 3 new friends' phone numbers. The night I'd burned dinner so badly we'd ordered pizza and eaten it on the back porch while watching thunderstorms roll in. The morning I'd found Emma and Jake asleep on the couch, a half-finished board game between them, Jake's rock collection scattered across the coffee table like protective talismans. Every single moment, I said. Even the terrible ones. They led here. She kissed the top of my head and went to start dinner. Emma and Jake settled into their documentary, debating whether penguins or polar bears were superior creatures. Outside, the sun began its descent, painting the living room in shades of gold. My phone buzzed. A message from Jessica. "Thank you for the pictures from Emma's school play. She looked so happy." I'd sent them at Emma's request. Small acts of grace, extended carefully over time. Jessica would never be part of our daily lives, but she existed on the periphery now, watching her daughter grow through carefully curated updates. "You're welcome," I typed back. She killed it. Standing ovation. I'm proud of her. 3 words, inadequate for everything unsaid. But they were honest, and honesty was more than we'd had before. "Me too," I responded, and set the phone aside. Emma laughed at something in the documentary, and Jake playfully shoved her shoulder. Caroline called from the kitchen that dinner would be ready in 15 minutes. Ordinary sounds, ordinary moments, extraordinary in their ordinariness. Later that evening, after Jake had been picked up by his father for the weekend and Emma had finished her homework, she appeared in the doorway of my home office. "Can I ask you something?" "Always." She came in and perched on the edge of my desk, swinging her legs the way she'd done since she was small enough to need help climbing up. "Do you think you'll ever tell Mom? About the DNA test being wrong?" I'd wondered when this conversation would come. Emma had overheard me on the phone with my lawyer last month, discussing the corrected results that I'd kept filed away for 2 years. "Do you think I should?" "I don't know. Maybe it would help her. Knowing she didn't lose me because I wasn't yours, but because of what she did." The insight startled me. 11 years old and already understanding the nuance between consequence and causation. That's very thoughtful of you. Or maybe it would just make her feel worse. Sometimes knowing the truth is harder than living with what you think is true. "When did you get so wise?" She grinned. "I've been reading a lot of fantasy novels. Characters are always grappling with moral complexity." I pulled her into a hug, and she let me, even though she'd been pulling away from physical affection lately, testing the boundaries of growing up. "I'll think about it," I promised. "But whatever I decide, it won't change anything about us. You know that, right?" "I know. You're stuck with me either way. Best kind of stuck there is." She bounded out of the office, calling for Caroline to help her with something in the kitchen. I heard their voices blend together, Caroline's patient explanations and Emma's rapid-fire questions, and felt that familiar peace settle over me. The DNA test sat in a file folder in my desk drawer, corrected results that proved Emma had always been mine in every possible way. Maybe someday I'd tell Jessica. Maybe someday it would matter. But for now, it was enough to know that the weapon she'd tried to use had misfired in ways she'd never understand. Jessica had tried to take everything. She'd walked into that Christmas dinner with a weapon and absolute certainty that she'd won. But weapons can misfire, and certainty can blind you to the truth. The truth was this: you can't destroy what's real. Love, family, commitment built over years of small moments and daily choices. Jessica had confused biology with belonging, assets with worth, winning with happiness. I'd learned different lessons. That revenge isn't about destruction, it's about protection. That justice matters less than peace. That sometimes the best payback is simply refusing to stay broken. Emma looked over at me and smiled, then returned to her argument with Jake about Arctic ecosystems. Caroline hummed in the kitchen, and something smelled amazing. In 2 hours, we'd eat dinner, clean up together, and settle in for whatever evening ritual the kids demanded. Normal life. Hard won, carefully built, fiercely protected. Jessica had tried to burn it down, and instead, she'd just cleared the ground for something better to grow. That was the real ending. Not the courtroom victory or the evidence files or even the revelation of her failures. It was this, a Tuesday evening in November, 2 years later, with my family around me and the future stretching out in quiet possibility. I'd won, but not the way Jessica thought winning looked. I'd won by refusing to let her define what mattered. By choosing Emma over revenge, progress over punishment, building over burning. And somewhere across town, Jessica was probably sitting in her small apartment, thinking about what she'd lost. Maybe she'd learned something. Maybe she'd become someone better. I hoped so, for her sake if not for ours. But either way, she was no longer my concern. My concern was dinner in 10 minutes, Emma's upcoming science project, Jake's birthday party next week, Caroline's work presentation on Friday. The million tiny details that make up a life. Jessica had handed me that DNA test expecting it to be a killing blow. Instead, it had been a liberation. It had forced me to decide what really mattered, to fight for it with everything I had, and to build something better from the wreckage. "Dad," Emma called. "Come settle this. Are polar bears better than penguins?" I laughed and joined them on the couch, pulling Emma against my side while Jake made his case for Team Penguin. Caroline appeared with drinks, and we all settled in to watch the documentary together. Outside, the world turned on its axis. Bills needed paying, laundry needed washing, life needed living. But for right now, in this moment, we were exactly where we needed to be. And that was the best revenge of all. A final word. The hardest lessons often teach us the most valuable truths. Betrayal can devastate, but it cannot destroy what we choose to protect. Love isn't about biology or contracts or who wins in court. It's about showing up, day after day, choosing to build rather than burn, to heal rather than hurt. When someone tries to take everything from you, remember, they can only take what you give them. Your peace, your future, your capacity for joy and growth are yours alone. Protect them fiercely. Fight for them strategically. And when the dust settles, build something so beautiful that their attempts at destruction become nothing more than cleared ground for new growth. Emma taught me that family isn't defined by DNA tests or legal documents. It's defined by who shows up when things get hard. Who reads the bedtime stories and wipes the tears and celebrates the victories, big and small. Jessica tried to prove that biology mattered more than bond, and in doing so, she proved the opposite. To anyone facing their own version of that Christmas dinner, document everything, protect yourself legally, but never lose sight of what really matters. Winning the battle means nothing if you lose yourself in the process. Choose peace over revenge, healing over hatred, building over burning. Because the best payback isn't watching your enemy fall. It's standing in your own life, years later, surrounded by people you love and who love you back, knowing that you refuse to let someone else's betrayal define your story. That's not just revenge. That's victory.